Hello everybody and welcome back for my continuation of my book reading of The Whispering Nights. Chapter 2. Morgan Appears. Late that evening, while having supper with her family, Martha told them that she had met Miss Applewhite. She did not mention anything else that had happened at the barn. Is she still alive and living up there in the big house? Asked her father in surprise. I remember her when I was a boy, and she wasn't young then. You better be polite to her if you want to go on playing in that barn. It belongs to her, you know. Does it? Said Martha. The children were used to hearing the villagers tell them to go away or make less noise. She felt grateful to Miss Applewhite, who hadn't said anything like that. Mrs. Timms was helping Martha's two little brothers to eat their supper, but now she looked up. I don't think you should spend so much time in that barn, Martha. We don't know what you're doing there, do we? And it's cold there. With those old stone floors, you're only wearing a thin dress. No, really, Mom, it isn't cold, replied Martha. And William's there too, she added, rather cleverly for her. Oh, said her mother, sounding a little relieved. That's William's sensible boy. The teacher's son, said Mr. Timms, finished his last piece of bread. Yes, a very nice boy, very polite. I'm surprised that he still got time for you and Susie, said her mother. Boys of his age usually like to be with other boys, not girls. Martha said he doesn't like what the other boys do, just fighting, that kind of thing. He likes doing things with us. For example, asked her father, lighting his pipe and sitting back in his armchair. He looked all ready for a long, comfortable conversation. Oh, just things, said Martha quickly. She knew that she was no good at keeping secrets and had to escape before her parents discovered any more of her. I think I'll have my bath now, Mom, she said, and hurried upstairs. She could not forget what had happened that afternoon, although she was trying very hard to think of something else. What would happen now because of the witch's brew? Would the witch called Morgan appear? These questions worried Martha all evening, and I'm sure I'll dream about all this tonight and wake up crying as usual, she thought. She often used to sleep badly. Her dreams were full of faceless ghosts, mysterious dark figures, and other nameless horrors chasing her as she tried to escape. She always woke up crying in great fear. It took her some time to calm down and realize that she was safe at home in her own bed. William and Susie did not have this problem. William only dreamed of exciting adventures, and I'm always the captain or the leader in the dream, he said. Fantastic. Susie said that she never dreamed, unless I've eaten too much. When Martha woke up in the middle of the night, she felt cold. But I haven't been dreaming, she thought. Perhaps I've been woken by a storm, although everything's quiet now. She was just going to turn over and go to sleep again when she noticed something on the far side of the room. There was a shadow on the floor, and she had the feeling that just before she looked at it, it had moved. Now the shadow was half on the floor and half on the wall, and looked like an old, bent woman dressed in black with her head covered. It's a shadow made by the curtain, thought Martha, and quickly pulled back the curtain at the window above her bed. But the shadow did not move. Martha pulled the blanket around herself, her heart beating loudly and her body shaking. She will look for your weakness. Well, she won't find him, Martha told herself suddenly. Shadows on the wall in the darkness. I used to be afraid of that kind of thing, but not anymore. Morgan won't succeed that way. And very quickly, while she still felt brave enough, she jumped out of bed and ran to the door to turn on the electric light. The room was immediately filled with bright yellow light. The shadow stayed for a second or two and then disappeared. Martha got back into bed. To her surprise, she did not really feel frightened. Morgan was here, she thought. I'm almost certain she was. But I didn't give in. With the light still on, she lay down and went to sleep again. The next morning, as they were walking to the barn, she told William and Susie what had happened to her in the night. Susie laughed. You're stupid, Martha. You are. It was just a bad dream, that's all. It wasn't, said Martha. This was different. How long did the shadow stay after you turned the light on? Asked William. 1 second? 2? I didn't actually count, said Martha, but it was long enough for me to be sure that it wasn't just a shadow. The barn lay ahead of them, its roof gold in the sunshine. Inside, everything was normal. It was cool and quiet. Susie noticed a big pile of straw in the corner. We could put some straw on the floor to sit on, she suggested, and went up over to pick some up. Suddenly, she jumped backwards with a scream. What's the matter? Asked William. Something moved under there, cried Susie, who was usually the calmest of people. Probably a cat, said William. No, bigger than that. You can get the straw yourself. I'm not going near it again. William walked across the floor and looked at the thick, dusty pile of straw. He touched it with his feet, and the whole of one end moved. They all three ran to the door. There really is something there, said William. Now do you believe me? Said Martha, please. About what happened to me in the night? This could be quite different, said Susie crossly. They stood in the doorway, watching the straw, and ready to run at any moment. But nothing happened. William picked up a stone and threw it at the straw, and then very slowly the straw moved again. They stared in horror as something began to come out of one end of the pile, making an unpleasant noise as it slid like a snake over the stone floor. It was a tail, dark, thick, round, with a smooth, shiny skin, and it had a large foot with claws. They could see the shape of an ugly black head under the straw. The children could not move. They stood frozen with fear in the doorway, and then suddenly William said, Look at its head. See what it's doing. Smoke was rising from the straw. And as they watched, flames appeared and the straw began to burn. Water! Shouted William. Quick, there's a tap and an old bucket outside. The whole of the pile was now on fire, and the thing's shiny tail was beating happily on the floor as the children threw water on the straw. There was a hissing sound, but the flames went on burning. William ran outside and pulled an old fire extinguisher off the wall. It probably won't work, it's too old, he thought. But when he banged on the floor, thick white foam came out, and he managed to point the heavy extinguisher at the straw. Clouds of black smoke filled the barn, and the white foam went all over the straw and the floor. There was a terrible smell and a loud hissing noise. The children ran outside, almost unable to breathe. Little by little, the smoke disappeared, and they looked fearfully back into the barn. The pile of straw was blackened and burned. But there was nothing else there. There, said Martha. Just like last night, but this time we all saw it, not just me. You were brave, William. Actually, I didn't really stop to think, he said. We ought to tell Miss Applewhite, said Martha. Susie, who normally pink-faced, was white, looked doubtful. Do you really think she'll believe us if we tell her we've seen a big shiny thing with claws, which breathed smoke and started a fire, and then just disappeared? Yes, said Martha simply. So they went to the door in the wall that led into Miss Applewhite's garden. They had never opened that door before, but they all felt that yesterday there had been an unspoken invitation. They entered the big garden, which had once been well cared for, but was now rather untidy. Miss Applewhite was cutting roses and putting them in a shallow bucket. She was wearing a very long old summer hat. "Excuse me," said William politely, "but I'm afraid we have to tell you something." "Well," said Miss Applewhite, looking up from her flowers, "I suppose that Morgan has come." They looked at each other, all rather reluctant to tell the story. At last William spoke, with Martha adding her bit about the shadow in the night. "I'm sorry about the foam and the burnt straw in the barn," William said at the end. "Oh, don't worry about that," said Miss Applewhite carefully, or carelessly. "Come and sit down for a moment." They all sat down in chairs in front of the large old stone house. "I must say, I don't think much of our first attempt. You're far too intelligent to be frightened by that." She smiled at them, and Martha felt warm inside. Somehow, Miss Applewhite's good opinion seemed very important. "Was it all right about the fire extinguisher?" asked William worriedly. "An excellent idea. Always try to surprise her. Never play the game her way. You have to fight against her with reason and science. She knows very little about either of them." "Do you think she'll come back?" asked Susie. Miss Applewhite thought for a moment. "Probably," she replied at last. "But you made a good start. Perhaps we should take the next step now, while we have the advantage over her. It could help us to win the fight against her." "How?" asked William, interested. "Well, we could have a Walpurgis night. Do you know about that?" "I can see that you don't. It was done in villages in the old days to drive out witches. People used to march through the street making as much noise as possible. We have to do it around the barn. This evening will be the best. Do you think your parents would agree to that?" The children looked at each other doubtfully. "Perhaps if I write to your parents personally," suggested Miss Applewhite clearly, "inviting you all to take a tea with me. We will not mention anything to do with the Walpurgis idea. They all agreed that this would probably work, so Miss Applewhite wrote each of them a polite invitation on thick, expensive writer paper in very black ink for their parents. The plan was successful, and just after dark that evening all three of them arrived back at the barn. Miss Applewhite was already there, surrounded by a large number of handbells, metal plates, spoons, pots, pans, and an old gun. "Help yourself," she cried. "Make as much noise as you can." At first it was difficult for the children. They couldn't remember anyone ever telling them to make a noise before, but as soon as they began to enjoy this new experience, they ran up and down outside the barn, banging the pots and pans with the spoons, ringing the bells, and shouting and screaming loudly. Miss Applewhite watched them, looking very pleased. She was burning some green plants in front of the barn. There was a strong, rather strange smell in the air. At last, the children all fell on the ground, exhausted. "Excellent," said Miss Applewhite. "Morgan will not like that at all." "Do you think we send her away?" asked William. Miss Applewhite looked around. It was suddenly silent after all the noise, and darkness covered everything. In the trees a bird gave a warning cry, and then was quiet. "We shall have to wait and see," she said. "Now what about something to eat? Your tea is ready in the house." And that was the end of Chapter 2, Morgan Appears. Thank you so much for listening. Hope you enjoyed it, and I'll catch you in the next one. Take care. Bye-bye.